sir.
Yes.
I'm Malamunariam from Seattle.
Seattle, that's right.
My question is, Allah Ta'ala says in Sukul whereas actual position is that practically the worldly sources of all drinking and sweet water are bestowed upon to the northern American countries, national countries. And whereas in the Middle East countries, they are deprived of from this natural source. On the contrary, but one thing at the same time, that spiritual water is bestowed upon the Middle East countries, on those countries, and these people are dead countries. Is it not a contradiction or something which I don't understand? Would you throw some light on this?
I don't see any contradiction whatsoever.
Practically 60% of the drinking and sweet water sources and other natural sources are bestowed upon by the Almighty to these northern countries, countries.
Who told you this?
Sir, it is written in the guidebook of USA.
See, you are talking of a very different phenomenon altogether. You are talking of reservoirs of water. But when God speaks, He says He sends water from the heaven. And far more water is poured down the rain of monsoon rains in India, in that tropical regions, than it is ever poured down on Canada. So just knowing that there are larger reservoirs of sweet water does not contradict that statement at all. Moreover, God is speaking of phenomenon. He is not referring to any particular region. A universal phenomenon is mentioned.
Most countries are practically African countries and middle countries, there is no water. But whereas there is a huge 60% of the source of water.
Where does God mention that I sent water to Africa or to India or to Arabia? Does it mention?
This is what
it is speaking of a universal phenomenon. That's right.
Allah says that we drive away the water to the earth, to the land, which requires it, which needs it. Those people need the water, whereas the water is here.
Just for God's sake, try to understand, yes, please. If there were no water, the land here would be Arzan Juruzan. But because God sent water here, so this is no longer the Arzan Juruzan. Where did God say that I am speaking of the land not in the north but also in the south, only in the south or in the middle? God is describing a natural phenomenon. So wherever that water reached, the dead earth came to life. This is what God is describing. So why do you misinterpret it?
The factual position, it appears to be that spiritual water is bestowed upon in those countries.
Who told you that?
Yes, sir. It appears like history says.
Why do you contradict? Excuse me. Why do you contradict the Holy Quran?
No.
The Holy Quran says we sent spiritual water to all the world, to all the people of the earth, in all ages. Hasn't that not been claimed by the Holy Quran?
Yes.
So why are you contradicting that? So why do you say it was sent only there? I have already explained, I have answered this question, that why so much emphasis is being observed from our vantage point to be concentrated on Middle East. I have explained already that prophets came all over the world only because their lines were not to give birth to the final prophet. So they gradually died out and their history was not preserved. If the Holy Quran were to preserve the history of all the religions of the world, this book would be larger than this whole hall. So God has mentioned in principle that we have been sending prophethood all over the world, but God says, addressing the Holy Prophet, that we tell you only a few names out of those. We do not mention others. But we have never deprived any section of humanity at any time in the world of this spiritual guidance which you refer to as spiritual water. Moreover, if by the same argument as you are trying to extend, how can you say that these areas are without their spiritual water because Christianity is a water from heaven? And this was Arjan Jorozan before Christianity reached here. So God is very right both in case of literal translation and metaphorical translation, that what descends from heaven is driven to the areas. If the water did not reach those areas, then they would be Arjan Jorozan. Without that, they would be Arjan Jorozan. Moreover, your knowledge of geography is only pertaining to this time. And you are trying to explain the entire universal phenomenon spread over millions of years. It is not so. If you had read geography better, you would have discovered that the areas of greenery and the areas of preservation of water have been changing. Tilkal ayyamu nudawiluha baina an-nas is another statement. Some areas which are desert today were full of foliage and full of greenery. If that were not so, oil will not be discovered under those deserts. What is the oil made of? Oil is made of wood and organic material which has long been buried. So God is speaking in a time frame which is beyond your conception. But if you increase your knowledge, then you will understand that no area of earth has been deprived of this phenomenon, of lush green phenomenon, from water which was poured heavily in those areas, but the climates change. And they change so slowly that one generation of human beings fails to understand that phenomenon. In England, we have seen climate changing slowly from wet to drier climate. The result is that even if one season is dry, suddenly the earth turns into Arjan Jorozan. That shows that before that it was like this. So if God's searchlight shifts from one area to the other and shifts its blessing to that area, the same thing will happen there. So who has told you that Arabia was always like this? It was not.
History says.
Pardon?
History as known history.
No, you don't know the known history. I'm telling you the known history. If you read geography, if you read petrology, etc., you will find, and you will be amazed to find, that Arabia once was an area of lush verdure. Intense growth had taken place here of greenery of all sorts, until the change was brought about. Change in climate, and the wet areas started receding back, like the phenomenon of a bald head. Sometimes the head is full of hair, and sometimes the hairline begins to recede, leaving a bald patch. This is exactly the phenomenon of appearance of deserts. But deserts are not always at the same place and at the same size.
Which means that these countries can also be converted into wet.
Of course.
Into desert.
These countries will be converted into deserts. Not only can be, but the Holy Quran says they will be converted into deserts. Because the Holy Quran, Allah speaking in Surah Kaf, informs us, Inna jalna ma alal ardi zinatan laha linabluwahum ayyuhum asanu amala wa inna la ja'iluna ma alaiha sayyidan juraza. It is speaking of the Christian land, of its verdure, of its growth, of its lush green. And then it says it's so beautiful to look at. But we are going to change this whole, this outlook into that of a desert. So God is speaking in a much larger time frame, and you are speaking only a short time frame, and only